Hey guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we will be recapping the ongoing Japanese anime series The New Gate. In an online death game called The New Gate, Shin, a game character controlled by a human, attempts to release the tens of thousands of players stuck in the game world. After killing the final boss, Shin rejoices over finally ending the game and creating a way home for himself and many others. But suddenly a gate opens and engulfs Shin in its mysteriously bright light. Shin awakens in the game world 500 years later and begins linking up with old friends and researching other ways to find his way to the real world. Join Shin on his remarkable journey home by subscribing to the channel and clicking on the notification bell for follow-up recaps of this series and many other amazing anime recaps. Grab your popcorn or whatever snacks you've got and have a nice watch. Shin, a scrawny high human game avatar, gets stuck in a next-generation game of magic and fantasy that uses bleeding-edge technology called the New Gate. One day, the game suddenly takes a weird turn, and the players without skills begin dying at the hands of the monsters in the game. Not only were the players dying in the game, but the players also ceased to exist in the real world. Luckily for our MC Shin, he is skillful enough to cut down any monsters that come his way. After defeating the final monster boss of the game and acquiring the titles the Critical, the Achiever, and the Liberator, Shin is sure that he has reached the end of the game, until a new gate of events opens, and Shin wakes up the following morning in a field, still in the game. Yikes. That must suck. Shin has a little inward conflict on whether he has awakened in the game or the real world. Doofus Shin checks his settings menu and realizes his stats have improved because he defeated the boss. Like a hopeful fool, Shin foolishly searches for the logout option and gets mad that the logout button is nowhere to be found. Shin immediately checks the connected players menu, but realizes he cannot connect to the game's network. Nimrod Shin throws a fit like a bratty child denied his sweets and complains about graduating from a death game to an endless trip. Shin points out that whining will not get him anywhere, so he gets on his feet and uses a dove-like device to locate his home base. Shin passes by a castle before getting to his home base. At his home base, Shin sees three men assaulting a young lady to fish out her master. The young lady tells the men dragging her not to let her go past the magic barrier, but they completely ignore her until a giant monster appears from nowhere. The oppressors run for their lives like little girls, and the elven girl falls in fear. Before the mythical creature can do any real damage, Shin swoops into the scene like an underpaid superhero and defeats it in the blink of an eye. Shin points out that the feeling he gets from the fights mimics the feelings of real-world combat. Now in the building, Tierra, with a wink-wink, large heart earnestly thanks her savior. She introduces herself as Tierra Lucent, and Shin presents himself as Alexandra the Great. Just kidding. Shin introduces himself as Shin. With a big heart, Tierra asks Shin if he knows her master. When Shin acts confused, Tierra surprisingly asks if there is anyone who doesn't know her master and acting shopkeeper of the Moon Sanctum, Shni Rezar. Slow Shin suddenly realizes who Tierra is referring to and asks if her master is a beautiful high elf with waist-length silver hair and an incredible body. Shin inwardly mentions that Shni was one of his supporting characters in the game. Shin foolishly collects himself and asks Tierra about the whereabouts of her master. Tierra refuses to disclose her master's location to her savior stranger, so she requests Shin to drop a message. Tierra charges Shin 1,000 jewels per message. Peasant Shin points out he only has jails and presents them on the table. Tierra flusters and tells Shin that the jails are the highest form of currency only kings and elders of a limited species can have. She adds that gold jail coins are an item for amplifying magic and are worth at least 10 billion jewels. Shin breaks a sweat and inwardly points out that in the game, jails were the littlest form of currency. Tierra is shocked after learning that Shin is an adventurer of the species High Human. She mentions that high human species have been extinct for 500 years. Shin immediately wonders if the tens of thousands of players were as well trapped in the game with him. He concludes that the players being trapped incident must have happened 500 years ago in the game world. Shin foolishly gives Tierra the gold coin while she swoons over fulfilling her dream of touching a jail coin. Shin mentions that with Tierra being an elf, she will put the jail coin to good use. Tierra stops Shin and tells him she is not an elf. Wait, what? Shin explains that her elven traits are clear. He mentions that Tierra is black-haired, golden-eyed, and a beautiful elven girl. Forgive the unmatching attributes. Our MC must be partially blind at the moment. Tierra turns around and sadly tells Shin that she made her master cast an identity cloaking spell on her because black-haired elves are a cursed symbol of misfortune. Shin asks Tierra what she means by a symbol of misfortune, and Tierra tells him that her black hair brings misfortune. Tierra explains that because of her hair color, monsters began attacking frequently, and she was kicked out of her village. But her master rescued her and put her in the shop. Tierra adds that her master has kept her safe in the protected shop for over 100 years. Shin frowns and asks the not-elven girl if her hair has always been black. Seeing blue hair? This is a sign to get your eyes checked. Tierra tells Shin that her hair used to be silver, but one day she was suddenly cursed, and her hair switched teams. Idiot Shin racks his dumb brain for ideas, and suddenly remembers a part of the game. Shin foolishly pulls out his settings kit and slides through the options. Tiara looks at the stranger scrolling his fingers through the air like a crazy freak and asks him what he is doing. Nitwit Shin ignores her and informs her that she has the cursed gift. He explains that the curse is why her hair switched teams and monsters started attacking her. Tiara points out that identifying the curse will not fix it. Shin proudly tells Tiara that there is a way to remove her curse before purifying her of her curse. After the curse purification, Tiara's hair turns part silver. Shin apologizes for the outcome of the purification. Tiara sheds a tear and thanks him for lifting her curse and reminding her how beautiful her hair was 100 years back. Shin asks Tiara to try going out of the barrier and assures her if any monsters come at her, he will take them down. Tiara wearily holds on to Shin, and the two walk into the forest without a problem. With tears of relief, Tiara looks at the sky in admiration. At the shop, Tiara asks Shin what he plans to do since her master won't be back for a while. Shin inwardly tells himself he needs to learn more about the game world. Shin points out that if Tiara's master is the true Shnee from the game, his other support characters exist. Tiara mentions to Shin that if he is going to Baerlicht Kingdom, he should take a letter of introduction to bypass the inspection line of the kingdom. Shin asks Tiara if she wants to give a stranger the introductory letter. Tiara assures Shin that if he is kind enough to lift her curse, it shows that he is stupidly good-natured. Shin decides to continue his journey, and Tiara promises to let him know when her master arrives. At the kingdom, Shin thanked his stars that he was allowed to cut the long line of immigrants thanks to the introduction letter. An adventurer informs him that introduction letters are like identification papers that can get one an audience with the king. The adventurer shows Shin to the guild and excuses himself. A receptionist with sweet and juicy mouth welcomes Shin to the adventurer's guild. Idiotic and perverted, Shin admires the receptionist's juicy mouth and softly tells her he has come to register as an adventurer. The receptionist shows him to another working girl for the registration, to another girl who looks the same as the receptionist but with a slightly smaller and juicy mouth. Shin points out that the registrar and the receptionist look alike, and the registrar explains that the receptionist is her older twin sister, Celica, and she is Silica. Later on, Shin complains about the registration taking a whole day. Celica, who has changed into a server's uniform, serves Shin a snack and discreetly asks him if she can verify his introduction letter authenticity in another room. Nimrod Shin agrees to do so after his snack before mentioning that he has no plan to meet the guild master on his first day. Celica informs Shin that the guild master is around. Shin foolishly turns around to see a big man with a scarred face. In another room, the scarred man introduces himself as Barlux Heim, the guild master, and asks Shin to present his Moon Sanctum letter of introduction for verification. After confirming that the letter of introduction is legit, Barlux asks Shin who gave him the letter. Shin tells him it was Tira. Barlux explains to Shin that a letter of introduction is the most trusted form of identification, and many try to steal them for ulterior purposes. Barlux adds that if Shin is not confident he can protect the letter, he should destroy it. Shin frowns and tells Barlux that Tiara gave him the letter because she trusts him, and he will not let her down. Shin lands on his warm bed after a long day, and promises to raise his rank the following day after getting his guild card. The following day, Shin sighs after realizing he remains stuck in the game world. At the guild, Silica hands Shin his guild card and explains that there are 9 adventurer ranks from SS and S to A through G, and completing jobs earns points and allows him to rank up. Shin shows Silica the job he has chosen and bids her goodbye. In the forest, Doofus Shin complains about how uneasy the mission of harvesting hilk grass is. Idiot Shin annoyingly points out that it was one of the simple missions in the game, before adding that he would take his time since the monsters are weak enough to be beaten with low-ranking equipment. Shin pulls out the settings menu to check for any lurking monsters. He spots an unusual movement of a monster on the map and tracks the beast. Shin checks out the Skullface Jack, a strong monster, standing beside a shattered wagon. Shin automatically has a flashback to his time in the guild when he overheard some people talking about someone who was attacked and killed by a Skullface Jack. Shin decides to attack the monster, but is surprised to see it wielding a light-type sword and points out it must be a unique monster. Shin attacks the monster again, but his low-quality sword barely leaves a scratch on the beast. With one strike left in his sword's life, Shin turns off his power limiter, hops into the air, and strikes down the beast at its core. After the monster falls, tosses its sword in the air and disappears. Shin picks up the gemstone it left behind and complains about the monster slicing his favorite sword in half. In the castle, a princess and her guards walk into her room and find the tossed sword stuck to the ground. The guards ask the princess, Rion, what to do about the sword in her room. Rion orders her guards to get an appraiser, determine the material composition of the sword, and find its wielder. In town, Shin dumbly walks into a group of spectators checking out severely injured men, and out of curiosity, He asks the adventurer who welcomed him into the kingdom what happened to the injured men. The adventurer tells Shin that the men were attacked in the northern woods by the skull-face monster, and only 4 survived among the 12 men who went into the woods. Shin connects the dots and concludes that the attack must have been the cause of the wrecked wagon he saw in the woods. The adventurer adds that although the incidents may not be related, witnesses reported seeing a sword flying out of the northern woods and crashing into the castle. Shin foolishly opens his mouth and denies knowing anything about the flying sword. After the adventurer leaves, Shin releases a breath of relief. In the guild, Shin presents the gemstone of the skull-face monster. Celica freaks out, and Shin blushes before telling Celica this is his first time seeing her lose her shit. An elven woman with green hair asks Shin to quit trying to tease her colleague. The elf introduces herself as Ely, and adds that Celica has told her all there is to know about Shin. Celica discreetly informs Ely that Shin claims he defeated the skull-face Jack monster. Nimrod Shin points out that there is no way to prove his claim because the skull-face's gear was unimpressive, so he did not bother to bring it with him. Ellis tells Shin that getting his hands on Jack-level gear would require either rank B or a small fortune, but Shin is barely an adventurer. Ely turns to Celica and asks her to examine the gemstone for skull-face Jack's mana, and Celica kindly tells Shin they need to borrow the gemstone for a while. Shin asks Ely if the skull-face Jack appears frequently in the northern woods. Ely tells him that the undead are born when mana fuses with the lingering grudges of the fallen, and the northern woods are full of savage monsters. Ely adds that the wood's mana isn't strong, so they don't normally see Jack-level monsters. Nincompoop Shin points out that the skull-face Jack he killed was an exception with level 359. The girls freak out at Shin's revelation, and Ely hurriedly asks Celica to examine the monster's strength through the gemstone. Slow Shin looks around in confusion, and Ely informs him that if the monster is as strong as he claims, then Shin is as strong as an A-rank party. Shin nervously asks Ely to keep his strength a secret to avoid unwanted attention. Shin is surprised to see Silica among the staff in a local restaurant. After Silica serves Shin his drink, a mysterious man with a magic spear called Venom strolls into the restaurant and sits at Shin's table. Obtuse Shin introduces himself, and the hard-looking guy with a sinister smirk introduces himself as Wilhelm Avis. Wilhelm asks Shin if he recently joined the adventurer's hustle, and Shin gladly tells him he is in his 3rd day of being an adventurer. Wilhelm smiles and points out that Shin's equipment says otherwise. Shin admits he is from the sticks and doesn't know what is normal in town. Wilhelm mentions that Shin being new is why his name does not scare him. Dumb Shin asks what Wilhelm has done to be feared by people, and Wilhelm boasts that he is called Wilhelm the Vampire by the towners because he hunts so many undead. Shin foolishly asks Wilhelm if he is sure his nickname did not come from how pale his skin looks. The people in the restaurant immediately assume Shin has gone mad, while Wilhelm tisks at Shin's insult. Wilhelm explains to Shin that he is referred to as the vampire because his spear consumes its victim's life force and transfers it to the wielder. Silica arrives at Shin's table to deliver the gentleman's order, and the 2 men begin munching on their food. In the library, Shin picks up a book on the history of the game kingdom. Shin tries to discover what became of the players who disappeared after logging out of the game. In a meeting containing Ely, Barlux, a pretty human man, an old man, and one other suited female doofus, Barlux announces that the skull-face Jack has been slain. The pretty human asks if the beast slayer did not collect the monster's sword or armor, and Ely tells him that the slayer claims to find the beast's armor unimpressive. The old man points out that there is always something wrong with those with letters of introduction. Barlux, a man with a letter of introduction, takes offense to the old man's generalization and questions him. Ely chips in that he is the perfect example of a weirdo. The old mentions that the appraisal confirmed the gem to be level 359. Barlux adds that the real problem is monsters of similar levels are lurking around the area. The pretty human points out that the defeated skull-face Jack is on par with a king. The suited female doofus mentions that she has dispatched investigators to look into the matter, and they will have answers the following day. Barlux points out that skull-faces become active at night. The pretty man mentions that the skull-face brandished unusual equipment and would like to know more about the equipment and the person who defeated it. Barlux informs the pretty man that he can tell him about the weapon, but as for the slayer, the adventurer has asked to keep their identity a secret. Barlux asks the pretty man why he is interested in the slayer. The pretty man brings up the incident of the sword that flew into the castle the same day the skull-face Jack was taken down. The pretty man adds that he thinks the 2 incidents are connected. Barlux asks what kind of sword was seen in the castle. The pretty man asks for the meeting members' discretion, before informing them that the blade is roughly 2 miles long and made of an alloy of magic steel and mithril permanently enchanted with the light element. The meeting members share a knowing look, and the old man points out that the sword's description is similar to their nation's royal sword. Barlux worriedly exclaims over the seriousness of the issue, and the pretty man tells him that is why he is interested in knowing the slayer. The man calls the attention of the meeting members to something of great concern. Outside the castle, Shin feels uncomfortable after realizing a little homeless-looking beast girl is watching him eating, and offers her one of his snacks. Shin wonders if the hungry little girl is a tiger-type beast. The homeless-looking girl introduces herself as Millie, and thanks the kind stranger for offering food. Shin introduces himself as Shin, and asks the little beast if she needs company, and announces the man has come to pick her up. Shin recognizes the man as Wilhelm, and watches Millie run to hug him. Shin asks Wilhelm if the little beast is his daughter. Wilhelm immediately rejects Shin's question and explains that she is one of the children from the church orphanage. Ouch. Wilhelm adds that Millie is good at sneaking out, so he always checks around town to find her. Wilhelm points out that he is surprised that the shy Millie likes Shin. Before leaving with Wilhelm, Millie whispers to Shin to save some creature in the northern woods. At night in his bed, Shin wonders why Millie asked him of all people to save the fox in the northern woods. Shin suddenly points out he has an idea of how to reach Schnee. The following day, idiotic Shin visits Tira to relay a message. Shin drops a sword and asks Tira to tell her master he wants to meet and catch up if she recognizes the sword. When Tira mentions that the sword is ancient, Shin confirms that it is an ancient sword of her master's. Shin adds that it can only be used by its creators, Schnee and him, or people they designate. Tira points out that although the ancient sword looks powerful, she does not wish to wield it because she feels it will swallow her. Shin notices Tira's weak expression and asks if she is okay. Tira assures Shin that she is okay. Tira adds that everything stops making sense whenever Shin is around. Nimrod Shin pulls out 2 envelopes and tells Tira he has a better way for her to reach out to him no matter where he is. Shin instructs Tira to write the recipient's name in the envelope and say, send whenever she wishes to talk to him or anybody else. Tira asks Shin why he did not send his message directly to her master with the envelopes. Shin explains that he tried to, but it doesn't work. When Tira asks how sure Shin is that the envelopes work, Shin steps outside to test them. After confirming that the envelope works, Shin points out that he doesn't know why he cannot send them to Schnee. Tira excitedly asks Shin if she can get a few of the envelopes, and Shin happily gives her from his surplus. Shin smartly trades the envelopes for his messages and walks out of the shop. In the northern woods, Shin racks his brain for ideas on how to save the fox. When Shin walks into a part of the forest, he hears strange voices telling him to leave. Like the dumb blondes in classic horror movies, Shin assumes the voices are attempts of a magical barrier to prevent him from walking further into the forest. Shin decides to enhance his resistance to mental interference to block the effect. After walking deeper into the forest, Shin comes across a shrine guided by 4 fox statues. At the shrine, Shin notices the voices have stopped and concludes that the shrine is the heart of the barrier. In the shrine, Shin finds a little white fox folded at the center of a magic circle. After inspecting the room for traps, Shin enters the magic circle and discovers that the little fox is dying. He casts healing magic on the dying fox, and Shin hears a strange sound. With his settings menu, Shin learns that many monsters are coming his way. Outside the shrine, a battalion of lower-level skull-face monsters surrounds Shin and the fox in his arms. Shin looks down at the weak fox and assures him he will clear out the enemies. Shin destroys all the skull-face monsters with 2 magical slashes of his spear. Shin suddenly gets notified of 2 beasts around the shrine. The 2 fox statues in front of the shrine begin glowing. The 2 statues transform into gigantic fox monsters, with level 674, surrounded by strange energy. When Shin dodges a fox's ice attack, the fox tries to stomp on him with a fire limb. Shin points out that the strange energy is pushing the foxes to behave crazy. Shin uses his shadow-blind magic to tie the foxes down. A black smokescreen suddenly engulfs the shrine, and Shin worriedly realizes that the energy is hurting the little fox. The white fox jumps at Shin, but Shin quickly dodges it. The fox jumps at him again, and Shin wonders how the shadow-blind magic wore off so quickly. Shin reminds himself he has to limit his power use so that the little fox won't get hurt. The little fox suddenly calls Shin's attention to a shiny path. Shin recognizes the shiny path as the magic circle he saw the fox lying in at the shrine and quickly runs to it. Shin sets the little fox on the ground, casts chain-binding spells on the 2 foxes, and finishes them off with his magic light spear. After destroying the foxes, the strange energy disappears, and the little fox becomes active. Shin is surprised that the little fox is an Elemental with level 211. Shin points out that in the game, the Elementales were top-tier monsters and were in the form of hominoids or giant foxes. Shin asks the little fox if it wants to come with him, and the fox happily occupies Shin's head. While walking through the northern woods, Shin recalls the skull-face monsters he fought at the shrine and admits he was not expecting such large amounts of monsters in the weak woods. Idiot Shin announces he will report the case to the guild before assuring the little fox he will keep its level and species a secret, so he gets to keep it. Shin and the little fox put their heads together. Shin chants some weird shit, and bright gold magic tattoos in dove shapes appear and disappear into each partner's hand. Shin announces that now that he and the fox have formed a contract, he has something in mind for them to do. After naming the happy little fox Yuzuha, Shin receives a message from Tiara telling him she has sent a message to her master on his behalf. At the guild, the twins with juicy melons argue over who will attend to Shin. Celica wins the argument and asks Shin to go on with his report. After reporting the Skullface incidents, Shin and Yuzuha check the notification board for interesting jobs. Yuzuha calls Shin's attention to a skill successor advert. Mindless Shin notices the job advert is from the church orphanage and is unranked. Shin assumes the job must be something special. Shin takes the job and travels to the city church. A sister walks into Shin gawking at the sight of the church. Shin apologizes for gawking and states his reason for visiting. The sister gasps and defensively asks Shin if he saw her job advert. Shin tells her he has come for the job and to check on Millie. The sister suspiciously asks Shin why he wants to see the young girl, and Shin explains that Millie has asked him to do something for her. The sister skeptically shows Shin to the visiting room. The sister arrives at the visiting room with Millie and warms up to Shin after seeing that Millie, who is usually shy, likes him. The sister apologizes for her hostility and tells Shin that it has been long since Millie has taken a liking to someone. Shin introduces himself by his name and profession, and the sister introduces herself as Tria and her profession. Shin asks permission to question Millie about what she told him to do the previous day, before asking Millie if the fox on his head is the fox she was referring to. Millie happily confirms it is and hugs Shin. Shin asks Yuzuha to thank Millie for sending him to save it. Yuzuha and Millie bow to each other like two little courteous fools. Shin looks at Tria and asks her to explain the job advert she posted. Tria points out that Shin had come after seeing the advert, which means he has great skills. Shin inwardly mentions that skill holders were common in the game, but must be rarer in the present. Tria explains that she is looking for someone who inherited a skill she wishes to learn. Shin asks Tria if she wishes to learn how to cure or heal, but Tria informs him that she wants to learn how to purify. Yikes. The church must be having some Annabelle-related problems. Shin points out that the purification skill is a tough one. Tria asks Shin if he knows anyone who can teach her. Shin informs her that learning the skill depends on her. Tria misunderstands Shin and confesses she doesn't have any money. Shin corrects her that he wants to know about Millie's power and would also like her to share whatever information the church acquires. While Tria weighs her options, Millie announces that Shin is a good person. Tria smiles, turns to Shin, and accepts his terms. When Tria apologizes that the church doesn't hold much information, Shin assures her he is more interested in learning about Millie's powers. Tria exposes that Millie possesses the title of Star Composer. Shin asks for more details, and Tria explains that Millie sometimes has unexpectedly accurate visions. Tria adds that Millie must have asked him for a favor because she saw something. Shin points out that some would use Millie's power for ulterior motives, and Tria informs him she has warned her associates to be wary of who they mention Millie's gift to. Tria mentions that there is an adventurer who provides the church with assistance. Shin smiles and asks if she means Wilhelm. Tria confirms it is. Shin agrees to take the job, before asking Tria if she is the one who wishes to learn the purification. Tria tells him that she has another sister in mind. While the orphans play with Yuzuha, Shin asks Millie why she isn't playing with the other children. Millie tells him she won't fit in. Yuzuha immediately runs to Shin's head and then into Millie's arms. Millie declares her win against the other children, and the children scream like little fearful shits. A girl with gray hair asks Shin if he is the one who is going to save them. Shin asks the little girl what she means. The little girl explains that the nun said they might get rid of the orphanage because the church no longer has a functioning priest. Shin asks the girl why Tria can't just take over. The young girl tells him the priest has to be someone who can use a special skill. The girl adds that the new priest decided to scrap the orphanage, but Tria says the former priest's granddaughter, Lacia, might have a superior claim to the church. Shin asks why the current priest would want to scrape the orphanage, and the children frown and mention they don't like him. Obtuse Shin curiously asks the gray-haired girl what the priest is like. The young girl tells him the priest is a pig who only cares about money. Millie butts in and announces Shin will save them. Shin asks the gray-haired girl if Millie is never wrong. When the gray-haired girl tells her she usually is, Shin points out that Millie is careful about who she shares things with. Hours later, Tria introduces a clumsy young lady to Shin as Lacia, the former priest's granddaughter. Shin explains to the clumsy young lady that whether or not she can learn the skill depends on her. Before he begins his teachings, Shin asks the sisters if they know where large numbers of high-level undead appear. Tria informs Shin of the ghost planes, which she claims are popular. Wilhelm looks at Shin in annoyance and asks him what he is after. Shin foolishly explains that the sisters told him about Millie and the adventurer from the orphanage who helps them keep Millie's secrets. Wilhelm scolds Tria for being too quick to trust, and Tria defends that Shin doesn't seem like a bad person. Tria adds that Millie said it was okay to trust Shin. Wilhelm locks up on the matter and tells Shin he trusts him since Millie trusts him. Shin informs the little group that to acquire Purify, one must defeat 200 undead over level 150 while holding an item called a Pure Prayer Orb. Shin offers to weaken the monsters for Lacia to finish them off. When Wilhelm asks Shin if what he speaks is true, Shin tells him it is, and adds that acquiring a Pure Prayer Orb is difficult, but he has one he can lend them. The group agrees on Shin's plan, and Wilhelm insists he accompanies Shin and Lacia. Wilhelm looks at Shin and mentions that even if Millie says Shin is good, he is not buying the no-name novice facade, which can take on loads of monsters over level 150 while carrying Lacia. At night, Wilhelm corners Shin and asks him if he is a chosen one. When Shin dumbly asks who a chosen person is, Wilhelm explains that chosen ones are people born with skills, titles, and knowledge they shouldn't have. Shin asks Wilhelm if the knowledge includes memories of previous lives. Wilhelm tells Shin that the knowledge is mostly information about items and monsters. Shin wonders if the reincarnation system of the game still works, but lies to Wilhelm that he has never heard about chosen people before. Shin inwardly admits that he has reincarnated within the game before, but he wasn't reborn in the game world as an infant. Wilhelm decides to cut Shin some slack. He asks Shin to be discreet about who he mentions the chosen term, because most people don't know what it is yet. Doofus Shin points out that Wilhelm is very soft before asking if he is sure people fear him. Wilhelm mentions that he has no power over what others think of him. When Shin tells Wilhelm he is trying to protect the orphans from the greedy priest, Wilhelm mentions that he is only helping the orphanage because the children keep crying in his ears. Shin sneakily calls Wilhelm a good guy, and Wilhelm loses his shit. While Wilhelm looks at Shin like a freak, Shin reads a message from Tira informing him that her master will be back soon, and that he should notify them if he ever leaves the kingdom. Shin brings out his letter of introduction, and Wilhelm brings him out. The two men and Lacia head out. Shin gives Lacia the Pure Prayer Orb and asks her to keep it on. A bunch of Skullface with bad energies tries to attack the group, but Shin weakens them with his magic for Lacia to finish. The second batch of monsters moves forward. While Shin and Wilhelm weaken them, Lacia finishes the job. After defeating all the monsters, the three come across a blue seal created by the guild. Wilhelm grants them access to the seal and the three work together to cleanse the area. In an open field, Rion, the princess, strikes down a weird monster with the sword. A skull-faced Jack with strange energy deals with some wounded men, and Schnee swoops in and defeats the beast at once. Schnee saves the wounded men and asks the men if the monster she defeated is the last of the irregular monsters mentioned in their report. The leader of the royal guards confirms it is. Schnee volunteers to stay and search the area before asking the guards to launch the magic item she gave them if anything happens. In another part of the forest, Wilhelm faces a skull face. He takes down the monster and asks Lacia to finish it off. After Lacia defeats the beast, a bright light engulfs her, and Shin assures her the light is only an effect that occurs when one meets the condition to learn a new skill. Lacia's mind becomes flooded with images of how to use the skill, and Shin congratulates her that she has successfully learned Purify. Yuzua picks up a signal and calls Shin's attention to it. In no time, the group of three noticed the big magic surge in the sky. Wilhelm explains that the magic surge is the magic matter that animates the skull faces, aka the cause of the strange energy. The magic fumes extract all the weird energy from a few skull faces and transform into a large monster with level 804. Lacia worriedly asks Shin if the seal will protect them, and the giant monster suddenly jumps high into the sky and cracks the seal. Immediately, the giant beast stares at them with a murderous glare, and the group of three scream in fear. Deep in the woods, a battalion of skull-face monsters surround Shin and his friend. Wilhelm suggests they break the skull faces up and escape, but Shin insists he will stay behind despite Wilhelm's warnings. Shin lifts his strength limits and tells Wilhelm that with the seal broken, escaping means allowing the monsters to roam around freely. Shin adds that he will stop them before they cause more damage, and asks Wilhelm to keep Lacia and Yuzuha safe. After Shin enhances Wilhelm's speed, Yuzuha refuses to leave Shin's head. Shin clears a path for Wilhelm and Lacia to escape, and summons his magic sword. Yuzuha suddenly burns all of the skull face with its fox's fire. Monster roars into the sky and calls on another round of skull faces that circles Shin. Shin uses his sword to create a flying sparrow thunderstrike, pulverizes the skull faces. Schnee sees the glow of the thunderstrike and travels in the direction. Shin checks his settings menu, sees that the forest is soaked in monsters, and wishes Schnee was there to help him. Shin suddenly notices that a familiar energy is traveling toward him. Shin suddenly takes a detour and links up with Schnee. Yuzuha creates a barrier to help his master catch up with Schnee without interruption. After catching up for a while, Yuzuha's magical barrier wears off, and the giant skull-face monster approaches them. Shin assures Schnee they have catching up to do, but they need to deal with the large beast first. Schnee and Shin raise their hands together and shoot a big magic circle into the sky. The magic circle sanctifies all of the skull-face monsters. Shin summons his sword, jumps into the sky, and slashes through the giant Skullface's core. The monster asks Shin to give it his power. Shin notices the oddness of the mythical creature, and picks up the gemstone left behind by it. Later on, Shin asks Shni if she remembers sending him off when he went to defeat the game monster boss. When Shni confirms she does, Shin points out that when he killed the final boss, everything should have come to an end. But there were huge doors in the dungeon boss room that opened after he defeated the boss. Shin adds that after the doors opened, he lost consciousness and woke up in a field 500 years later. Shni informs Shin that the dungeon disappeared without a trace, and when other players' support characters started saying their masters had vanished, she knew that Shin had defeated the dungeon, but she and the other supporting characters found it strange that they remained when they should have disappeared with their masters. Shni adds that the seismic shifts threw the continent into chaos, so they split up to work separately. Shni mentions that she returned to the Moon Sanctum, and Shin points out that her story is exactly what he had summed up. Shin asks Shni to stop calling him master to avoid a fuss if someone overheard a legend like her addressing him as her master. Nimrod Shin tells Shni to call him by his name, and his heart almost explodes when she does. When asked what he wishes to do next, Shin explains that he wishes to visit the sacred site he read about. Shni suddenly asks Shin if he would head home if he ever finds a way out of the game. Shni feels sad when Shin tells her that he will. Shin asks Shni what she remembers from the game. Shni informs him that she remembers everything from the day they descended to the land together. Shni adds that she became more aware during the period Shin and the others called the Death Game. Shin feels bad that the characters knew they would disappear after the masters logged out, but Shni tells him not to feel bad before adding that they were not completely autonomous, and there was nothing they could have done. Shin tries to dismiss Shni's words, but Shni points out that even if Shin knew of the supporting character's awareness of disappearing after the game, it would not have stopped him from defeating the dungeon boss. Before leaving the area, Shni asks Shin who the fox is, and Shin informs her it is his new partner. After telling Shni about Yuzuha's level and class, Shni calls Shin's attention to the fox's tail. Yuzuha yawns and greets its master good morning in the cutest voice. Shin asks the fox if it could speak all along, and Yuzuha explains that after the defeat of the giant beast, its head becomes clear. Shin instructs the talking fox never to speak in front of people no matter what happens. Yuzuha asks if it is allowed to use telepathy, and Shin assures it that it can. While petting Yuzuha, Shni points out that no one has ever successfully tamed an elemental. Shin suddenly remembers Wilhelm and Lachia, and mentions they have to leave immediately. On Wilhelm's back, Lachia asks if Shin is doing fine, and Wilhelm assures her Shin is strong enough to protect himself. Wilhelm suddenly senses a body moving at a high speed, and covers Lachia. Shin and Shni appear from the sky and startles Wilhelm and Lachia. In the woods, Rion and her soldiers come across a divided ground. Rion recalls that after they heard the mysterious voice, a horde of skullfaces suddenly appeared, and when a magic bright circle appeared in the sky, the skullfaxes turned to dust. While Rion wonders who is responsible for the magic circle in the opened ground, one of her men shows her Shin's sword. The guard explains that he found the sword at the beginning of the ground fissure. The guard calls Rion's attention to the bird symbol at the blade handle, and points out that the bird symbol is called a falcon. The guard mentions that he recognizes the blacksmith who created the sword, before showing Rion how powerful it is by splitting the ground with it. The guard declares that the blacksmith who forged the blade is a high human, the most skilled smithy of his kind. Rion points out that she didn't think high humans were left in their world. The guard mentions that his lady is right before adding that at least they know who they are dealing with. Rion asks her chief guard if the black blacksmith owns the Moon Sanctum. After the chief guard confirms her question, Rion announces they must visit the Moon Sanctum upon their return. When the chief guard asks his lady what she would do if it is confirmed that the higher humans are back, Rion smiles and tells him she will first consider marriage and challenge them to a duel. The chief guard warns his lady not to suddenly attack the higher human and claim to be testing his skills. In another part of the woods, Wilhelm interrogates Shin about his identity after recognizing Shni. Before stupid Shin can respond, Shni greets Wilhelm like an old acquaintance. Wilhelm playfully attacks him with his vampire spear and accuses Shin of giving Shni credit when he was the one who unleashed the massive amount of mana. Shin foolishly asks Wilhelm how he found out he is responsible for a large amount of mana, and Wilhelm beats him up while laying accusations on Shin. After dodging Wilhelm's attacks, Shin comes clean about his species and everything. Shin asks Wilhelm if there are any records of high human, and Wilhelm informs him that there are only records of their strength and skill. Shin breaks a sweat and points out he is confident in his blacksmithing. In surprise, Wilhelm asks Shin if he is a blacksmith. Shin confirms he is, and offers to fix Wilhelm's spear. Wilhelm rejects his offer and slanders Shin for being a scam. Lachia wakes from her sleep and asks who Shni is. Lachia freaks out after realizing she is in the presence of the Shni Rizar. Before parting, Shin hands Wilhelm a magic envelope, and Wilhelm agrees to use the envelope if he is ever desperate. After accepting Wilhelm's condition, Shin assures Wilhelm he will not hesitate to help him no matter how serious the situation is. Shni looks at her master in admiration and reminds him that just like before, He never boasted about his mighty strength while protecting the weak. Ouch. I'm pretty sure Wilhelm felt the stray bullet wherever he was. At the Moon Sanctum, Tiara welcomes her master and blabs about a stranger claiming to know her. Tiara realizes the stranger has arrived with her master and asks how the two found each other. The two masters agree to narrate their history over dinner, and Tiara feels conflicted at the thought of Shin eating with them. Schnee introduces Shin as the owner of the Moon Sanctum. Tiara refuses to come around with the revelation and protests that the owner of the Moon Sanctum is a legendary high human, not an unserious and scrawny-looking doofus. Shin reminds Tiara that he told her he was of a high human species, but Tiara exclaims that she never took him seriously. Tiara eventually comes around and apologizes to Shin for her impudence. Shin graciously accepts Tiara's pleas and introduces her to Yuzuha. Over dinner, the three buffoons discuss the elegant meal Schnee made and the hard-to-obtain ingredients Shin had provided to make it. After dinner, Tiara drunkenly accuses Shin of worrying too much and begins misbehaving. Schnee offers to put Tiara to bed and Shin retires to his bedroom. Shin wakes up in the middle of the night after feeling a soft pressure on his body. He freaks out when he finds Schnee's sweet and fluffy body tucked in beside her. Shin realizes Schnee is tearing up in her sleep and comforts her overnight. Yuzuha suddenly levels up and transforms into a little fox beast species the following morning. The girls take in the news of Yuzuha's transformation calmly and present their breakfast. After breakfast, Schnee asks Yuzuha why she was in the shrine. Yuzuha explains that she was there because it was the least uncomfortable spot in the forest, and she is unsure of the meaning of the symbols in the magic circle. Shin asks Yuzuha if she knows anything about the disappearance of people 500 years ago, and Yuzuha responds that people rarely visit the shrine. In confusion, Shin asks Yuzuha what she was doing in the shrine before he saved her. Yuzuha foolishly explains that she was napping in the sun when the ground suddenly shook. The wind blew fervently, and the mountain suddenly blew up. Yuzuha adds that she tried to keep everything at bay, and Shin concludes that there was a natural disaster, and she tried to stop it. Yuzuha confirms Shin's conclusion and continues her narrative. Yuzuha tells the group that all her efforts to stop the disaster hurt her, so she went to the shrine to rest, and when she thought her tie alive was up, Shin showed up and saved her. Shin points out that he came in time because of Millie, and the two little fools agree to visit Millie to thank her again. Schnee suggests they have a special snack made by Tiara. Over lunch, Schnee informs her stupid master that there is someone she would like him to meet as soon as possible. Shin's demeanor changes after learning that Schnee wants him to meet a person named Gerart. Shin recalls Gerart's face and expresses his disbelief over Gerart being alive after 500 years, since high beasts like Gerart only live 150 years at most. Schnee points out that Gerart's days are numbered and he has been waiting for Shin. Schnee informs her master that Gerart united the beast species and formed the Farnid Beast Alliance. After assuring that Gerard is in no real danger, Shin announces he will visit him after taking care of a few things. The group of four agrees to go on their journey the following morning and find a temporary solution to the Moon Sanctum. While useless Shin mindlessly blabs, Schnee asks permission to report the kingdom about the skull faces in the woods and act independently for some time. Shin permits Schnee to carry out her wishes and adds that he will use their time apart to look for a job in the direction of Farnid, so he can try to rank up while traveling to see Gerart. Schnee suggests they form a party of adventurers for easy communication. Shin forges a replacement for his lost sword, and a few more for sale in the shop. Outside the shop, Shin loses his mind over the juicy cherry blossoms Tiara is revealing. At the town square, Tiara gushes over how nice the area looks. Shin feels warmed by Tiara's cute reaction. He reminds her of their reason outside before suggesting they stroll around town after finishing their errand. As Tiara drags Shin to the guild, Shin has a flashback to how they met before asking Tiara how she knows where the guild is. Tiara dumbly stops in her tracks and looks around confused. Promiscuous Shin chuckles and pulls the little elf in the right direction. Tiara looks at their intertwined hands and blushes. In the guild, Shin receives his upgraded rank card. Shin realizes he has been moved to a rank E, and asks Celica how he is being issued an upgrade even when he has not completed any jobs. Celica reminds Shin that he defeated a high-ranking Skullface and a surprise horde of Skullfaces. Celica smiles and adds that the guild has verified his reports and has decided to promote him. When Celica mentions that she thinks promoting Shin to an A rank is more befitting, Shin tells her that other adventurers will not overlook such a promotion. Celica jealously asks Shin who the girl beside him is, and spineless Shin mindlessly informs her that he and Tiara are traveling on mutual business. Shin adds that the lady beside him wishes to register as an adventurer and get a guild card. Celica randomly asks Shin if the young lady beside him is his girlfriend. The master and servant nervously deny Celica's accusation. After a short while of banter, Shin asks Celica if she has any information on the sacred sites. When asked what a sacred site is, Shin explains that sacred sites are the places said to have been destroyed during the Dusk of Prosperity. Celica apologizes and informs Shin that she cannot disclose the information to anyone below rank B. Shin portrays a pained foolish man's smile, promises to ask again when he is ranked B, and asks Celica if there are available jobs he can take on his way to Farned. Celica reads out an available mission and instructs Shin that he and 2 other adventurers will depart by 3 in the afternoon. Instead of waiting for her guild card in the guild, Tira and Shin decide to stroll around town before branching at the church. After having a nice stroll around town, Tira and Shin arrive at the church. Tira and Lazia respectively introduce themselves by name and profession, and Lazia gushes over how incredible it is to work for Schnee. In the visiting room, Millie thanks Shin for saving the orphanage. When Tria and clumsy Lazia thank Shin, Shin dismisses their thanks like a humble idiot secretly enjoying praises and asks where Wilhelm is. Tria informs Shin that Wilhelm is investigating the other priest because of how suspiciously the priest backed down without a fight when he was overthrown. Shin gifts the ladies in the room Lucky Charms, and the children in the orphanage burst into the room to play with Shin. Shin makes fun of Tiara when she shows up with kids hanging around her. After their visit, Lazia apologizes on behalf of the children and messes up her goodbyes. While Tiara stares at her guild card, Shin suggests they pick up the Moon Sanctum. Shin shows Tiara a big-ass diamond and explains that the diamond is enchanted with a teleportation spell that instantly warps the holder to a saved location. After a short banter, Shin and Tiara teleport to the Moon Sanctum. At the Moon Sanctum, Shin chants the word storage and turns the Moon Sanctum into a silver necklace. Shin shows Tiara the necklace and explains that the necklace is the Moon Sanctum in transport mode. After concluding their final errand of the day, the team of 2 unsuspecting fools proceeds to their job. By a wagon outside the kingdom, a beastman asks the team of 2 if they are part of the adventurers who took the job. Shin confirms they are and introduces himself. The beastman introduces himself as Gaian. A little lady with red hair swooshes in and coldly introduces herself as Tsubaki. The dwarf merchant the adventurers were assigned to protect walks into the scene and introduces himself. The group of adventurers and the merchant begin their journey in no time. The king is bewildered in the castle to learn that the Moon Sanctum has disappeared, and the princess asks what has become of Schnee Rizar. A post holder, who seems tired of life, tells the princess they have been informed that she is headed to the castle and will arrive before the end of the day. The princess advises her father, the king, that since they don't have enough information about what happened, they should wait for Schnee's arrival. In the wagon, the adventurers introduce themselves by their ranks and specialization. Gaian begins by telling the group that he is a samurai by trade and is ranked A. Tsubaki informs the group she is a boxer with a rank E and can use supporting magic. Tira nervously exposes that she is an alchemist who can use bows and swords. Tira blushes and adds that she is of rank G. With a stupid smile, Shin tells the group that he is a samurai with a rank E and can use a bit of fire and lighting magic. Shin mentions that Tuzuha is a little monster who has a signed contract with him. Tsubaki asks Shin if he comes from Hinamoto, but Shin tells her he isn't. Tsubaki adds that most samurais are from Hinamoto, and those who become samurais tend to be the eccentric kind. Shin dismisses Tsubaki's generalization and tells her samurais are usually strong. While Gaian tells Shin about Hinamoto, a group of men attack their wagon. After getting out of the wagon, Shin asks the attackers if they are bandits. The head of the bandits threatens Shin to leave all his valuables and scream if he values his life. Shin asks the merchant to get into the wagon and assigns Yuzuha to protect the merchant. Shin asks Gaian what they should do to the about-to-be unfortunate bandits. Gaian suggests they wait for the bandits to attack before taking turns tabling them. Meanwhile, Tira readies herself for murder. The bandits promise to make the adventurers beg and cry, and Tira admits she is too scared to attack anyone. Gaian pulls out his sword and gives the bandits a final warning, but the bandit leader mocks him for being the only A rank among the other powerless adventurers. The bandit's leader and his goons mock the adventurers until an arrow suddenly takes down 2 of their men. Tira proudly shows herself, and the bandit's leader orders his goons to attack. Tsubaki punches the living shit out of one of the bandits and the others become scared. Gaian strikes down another bandit, and Shin slashes 2 bandits in anger. The bandit's leader asks how a team of low-ranked adventurers use magic items higher than their level. Shin ignores the vagabond and asks him what he wishes to do now that he is alone. Shin slashes the bandit's leader's sword in half and gives him a shiner. After tying up the bandit's leader, Shin asks him how he gathered information about their ranks. Tiara, who has noticed the murderous gaze in Shin's eyes, calls his attention. Tsubaki asks what in the flying heck the 2 fools are doing while Tiara stops Shin from lifting his head, and Shin asks what she has gotten into. Tiara points out that Shin is back to his usual self and walks away, and she wonders if Shin was aware of his dark aura. Tiara turns around and freaks out after catching Shin's eyes. In the wagon, Gaian tells Tsubaki that the bandits attempted to raid the wagon for goods connected to the church, but the bandits themselves were unaware of what the goods were. Tsubaki asks Gaian if the bandits attacked them without knowing what they should take, and Gaian tells her that the bandits intended to kill them and make off with all the cargo. Shin has a flashback to when Tiara said they needed official authorization from the church HQ, and immediately concludes that someone must be trying to prevent it from happening. Shin suddenly feels fortunate to be part of the adventurers protecting the wagon. At the merchant's destination, the merchant thanks the adventurers for their help and hands them their job completion certificate. After reporting to the nearest guild, the team of 4 divides into teams of 2s and part ways. Obtuse Shin wonders about their next mode of transportation to Farnid before concluding he would buy a wagon for a more comfortable journey. At the wagon shop, Tira gives up after trying to convince Shin to swallow his unnecessary urge to modify whichever wagon he chooses. After choosing a nice big wagon, the salesman tries to convince Shin to get a monster to pull his chosen wagon, but Shin simply tells him he will consider the idea. Outside the wagon shop, Shin points out that if they need help from monsters pulling their wagon, Yuzuha will do just fine. Shni contacts Shin with telepathy to inform him she is done with her business in the kingdom and is on her way to him. Shni volunteers to capture a monster for Shin's newly bought wagon and meet up with him within a day. Shni informs Shin of the castle's concern about the disappearance of the moon sanctuary, and Shin agrees it is best for the kingdom. Shni tells Shin about the many gagful attempts of some kingdoms to acquire her and gain ownership of the moon sanctum. After Shni ends the spiritual phone call, a kind small-time merchant recommends a suitable inn for her foreign customers. At the fancy inn, Tiara and Shin blush and get nervous when the receptionist asks if they would like to share a room. While searching for their separate rooms, Shin complains about how expensive the luxurious inn is. After settling in, Shin is interrupted by Tiara. Tiara asks Shin if he told Shni where they were. Shin informs Tiara that Shni is set to arrive the following day. After having dinner, Tira announces she would like a nice bath before knocking out, and Tezuha insists she joins her. Tezuha drags Tira into the bathroom in Shin's room. Meanwhile, a monster in the woods tries to attack Shni. Tiara watches Shin modify his wagon in the wagon shop the following morning. After Shin announces he is finished within a few seconds, Tiara accuses him of being a 1-minute modification man. Shni contacts her master about her location, and Shin announces Tiara should help him round up so they can link up with Shni. In the woods, Shin and Tezuha sense the presence of a mighty beast. In the presence of the beast, Shin reads the stat of the powerful monster, and Shni walks in front of it. Shni presents the beast to her master, and Shin asks her where she encountered such a powerful and rare monster. Shni informs Shin that she found it near the sacred mountain. Shin gives love-struck Shni a backhanded compliment, and the rare monster takes a liking to Tira. Shni mindlessly thanks Shin for his compliment and calmly tells him she knew she had to get the best of all for him. Shin complains about not having a wagon big enough for the monster to carry, but Shni assures him she has it covered before ordering the beast to shrink. Shni offers to shrink the monster more, and Shin assures her its current size is perfect. Shni begins feeling bad about her choices, and Shin nervously assures her that her beast will do. Tezuha communicates with the beast in the beast language and announces that the beast says they can count on his service. Shin pats the sacred beast and asks Shni what its name is. Shni informs Shin that she named the beast Shimmer, and Shimmer can use illustration and thunder skills. In the wagon, Shin informs Shimmer of their destination and the purpose of the mission. While Shimmer moves at the speed of light, Tira points out that Shin's modifications have made her ride comfortable, despite the speed. After discussing in beast language, Tezuha explains that Shimmer was narrating his childhood story of when he and his mother used to rule the sacred mountain together. Unfortunately, the beast's mother got gunned down by an adventurer. Tezuha becomes the intermediary between human language and beast language. When Tezuha translates that the beast followed Shni because of Tira's stench, Tira suddenly recalls saving a young similar monster when she was younger. After realizing Tira and Shimmer are old-time pals, Shni offers to transfer ownership to Tira. Shni stops the wagon, breaches her ownership with the beast, and calls on Tiara to form a new contract with the willing beast. Tiara hesitates, but eventually puts on her big boy pants. After the contract, Tiara staggers and Shin quickly catches her. Tiara apologizes for her weakness, and the group decides to camp for the night. While Tiara sleeps peacefully, Shin asks Shni if she gave Shimmer to Tira for it to protect her. Shni admits she did, before adding that they cannot always be around to save her, and that she would feel better knowing Shimmer is with Tira when Tira chooses her path. Shin thanks Shni for always coming through for him, and assures him that he can forever count on her. Shin and the girls link up with Gerart's messengers the following morning. While the messengers lead the way, Shin asks Shni how she knows the messengers are not dangerous phonies. Shni informs Shin that their escorts are Gerart's grandchildren. A messenger announces Shin's arrival, and Shin walks into Gerart's house. Gerart welcomes his old master warmly. Gerart admits he never thought he would get to see Shin before his demise, and Shin mentions he did not expect Gerart to be alive. Gerart laughs before confessing he is equally confused about how he is still hanging around way past his bedtime. Gerart introduces the messengers as Wolfgang, the king of the village, and Quore, the daughter of the king of the village. Gerart points at the elephant and tortoise in human clothing before presenting them to Shin as his right and left hand respectively. Shin announces he is a high human and politely greets the strangers in the room. Gerart urges Shin to speak informally, and Shin repeats the request to Gerart. Gerart explains that he has to talk to Shin respectively because his people believe that high humans are legendary beings to be feared and revered. Outside the building, Shin and Geralt laugh over an old memory they share. Shin exposes his knowledge about Gerart's founded nation, and Geralt accuses Schnee of being a blabbermouth. After Schnee excuses the men to make tea, Shin narrates his last and how he got stuck in the game. Geralt announces he has something to tell Shin. With a creepy smile, Geralt informs Shin that he has a month to live. Nimrod Shin asks the odd old geezer how he knows, and Geralt mentions that as soon as he became aware of Shin's location, he felt life slipping away from him, almost as if his system had ended its purpose of waiting for its master's return. Geralt suddenly turns to Shin and challenges him to a duel. Shin asks Geralt if his wish is to die in battle, and Geralt admits he wants to duel with the strongest warrior he knows and die in the process. With a serious face, Shin agrees to grant Geralt his wish. What a collection of psychotic murderers. Schnee, who has been Eve quarrel-ropping, quietly walks away, and Shin asks Geralt if he has told his people about the duel. Geralt tells Shin he will tell them soon, even though he has a hunch that the elephant and tortoise are aware. Geralt adds that Wolfgang, the current king, will make a fine leader when he is gone. The following night, Geralt announces that he has chosen to fight to the death against Shin in a week. The elephant, tortoise, and Wolfgang take the news calmly, but Wolfgang's daughter protests. Geralt explains that he is about to fulfill his undying wish and wants her to witness it. The girl agrees, and Geralt announces the venue of the fight. Shin and Geralt stare into the night moon with different thoughts of their duel partner. The day before the duel, Shin releases the Moon Sanctum, forges magic-infused metal globes for Geralt, and hands them to Geralt. Geralt thanks Shin earnestly, and asks him if he will go home and leave Schnee behind if he ever finds a way to go home. Shin immediately tells Geralt that his reason for fighting is to find his way home, and he will do all he can to find his way home. Shin tells Geralt about his wish to take Schnee wherever he goes, but Geralt snaps him out of his fantasy and into reality. On the day of the duel, Geralt is a bit too happy for someone who just orchestrated his death. Before the duel, Shin assigns Schnee to stop stray attacks. Schnee assures her master that she will handle everything, and all he has to do is fight to his heart's content. Geralt says his goodbyes to his goons and hands the village to Wolfgang's care. The four beasts' men watch their leader walk into his death, wish with the happiest smile. The spectators watch the woods blow up at random places. Geralt feels a thrill while blocking Shin's attacks from a distance in the woods. The two opponents are ecstatic to relieve the amazing sensation of a good fight they had almost forgotten. After a couple of commotion, Schnee points out that the two fools must be done with their warm-ups and are about to begin the main fight. Tiara is wowed after learning that Shin and Gerart's violent clashes are warm-ups. She asks Schnee if she is as powerful as Gerart, and Schnee admits that she would struggle in a fight against Gerart. In the woods, Gerart tells Shin that the new techniques he developed are useless against the mighty Shin. Shin asks Gerart to unleash his true potential, and Gerart asks Shin to get ready for him. Gerart transforms into a monstrous white beast and has a flashback to when Shin had told him he would not fight him with the move he used to defeat the final boss. In the present, Gerart admits that even if he would do the same if he were in place of Shin, he wishes for Shin to fight him with his full power. Shin shoots a red magic light at Gerart, but Gerart dodges it and ambushes Shin. Shin blocks Gerart's attack and the two opponents fly backward. Gerart unleashes his ultimate move against Shin and sends him flying. When Shin comments about how powerful Gerart's move is, Gerart ambushes Shin and punches and kicks at him. Shin blocks every attack from Gerart and floats in the air. In the air, Shin inwardly apologizes to Gerart for holding back before he releases his maximum strength. Gerart feels a thrill, and the two men come at each other with maximum strength. The spectators watch a massive power surge glow in the woods, and Schnee announces the fight is about to end. In the woods, Gerart wins the power struggle and ambushes Shin. Right after Gerart punches Shin softly, he staggers, stumbles to the ground, and coughs up blood. Gerart turns into his human form and declares his end is near. Shin commends Gerart over a great fight, and Gerart asks Shin if he went all out on him. Shin understandingly moves back and unleashes his 100% strength. Gerart looks at his master's full potential and feels glad to experience such a beautiful sight before his death. Schnee announces the battle is finished, and Shin arrives with Gerart's lifeless body on his back. Shin informs the beast people that Gerart managed to land a hit against him. Shin adds that it means Gerart has ascended to a high human level. The elephant points out the satisfied expression on their dead leader's face. After Gerart's burial, Schnee walks into Shin, staring into the moon. Shin sheds tears and admits that even if he has honored Gerart's death wish, it feels terrible to watch his friend die. In town, Shin asks the girls why they are dressed like beasts. Schnee explains that since elves stand out, disguising themselves as beasts will allow Tiara and her to blend in. Schnee blushes and asks Shin what he thinks of her new look. Shin blushes and tells her she looks good. Tiara points out that she has never seen Schnee act so strangely, and Shin seconds Tiara's observation. Shin and the girls head to Schwede's abode to meet other Beastmen representatives. In Schwede's abode, Shin asks Schnee who Schwede is. Schnee explains that although Schwede was the first emperor of the Dragon Empire, Kilmont. Schweid cut his ties with the imperial family. Shin wonders how an emperor can reject his post. Schnee informs him that the current emperor was originally meant to be the emperor, but was injured during the nation's founding, and Schweid was just a substitute. A servant shows Shin and the girls into a room before excusing himself to get Schweid. Wolfgang announces his leave and asks Shin to rely on his daughter for any help he might need. After waiting for a while, the servant walks in with Schweid. Shin recognizes Schweid, and Schweid immediately goes to his knees and welcomes Shin, his master. Still, on his knees, Schweid pledges to serve him once more and be the spear that pierces Shin's foes. Shin blushes and tells him to tone it down. Schweid tries to protest, but Schnee assures him Shin wants him to be informal with him. Schweid agrees and asks Schnee why she is dressed in the beast's disguise. Schnee admits she changed clothes to suit Shin's taste. Over tea, Shin tells Schweid about the demise of Geralt. After Shin's narratives, Schweid asks Shin what his plans for the future are. Shin mentions that he will be going to the Sacred. Schweid announces he is heading to Kilmont, and Shin points out that it has been long since they parted. Shin walks towards the door and summons Schweid's spear. Shin gives Schweid his long-lost spear and informs him he has made a few modifications. When Schweid comments on how powerful his spear feels, Shin happily mentions that his Mama control has improved since he repaired Gerart's equipment, and has improved 5 times than it used to be. Schweid points out that Shin's upgrade in such a short time is incredible. At the guild, Shin takes a job advert for slaying a group of goblins. Wolfgang's daughter, Quore, asks if she can come along. Shin asks her if she can, and Quore tells him that after the mission, she will go to her mission. Shin asks the girl what job she is doing, and Quore explains that she has been assigned to investigate the forest where Geralt and Shin fought the other day to ensure it's growing fine. Shin asks Quore if he can join her in her investigation, and Quore agrees to let him. Shin and the girls hide behind a bush beside a pack of golems in the forest. Within seconds, the group ambushes the golems and takes them down. Shin and the girls investigate the duel area for any unnatural elements. Quore instructs the group to pick any unusual herbs growing and check in the regenerated trees. Shin visits the guild to submit proof of a completed mission and is handed a message from Barlux. Shin informs the group that Barlux has written to him to visit the castle as soon as possible. Shin foolishly wonders why the castle would request his presence, but then suddenly recalls the skull-faced sword he flung into the castle. Quore admits she would love to travel with them, but cannot leave her country. Shin assures her it's all good, and tells her he wants her to do something for him. At night, Quore announces Shin's presence to her father, Wolfgang. Shin apologizes for his late visit, informs Wolfgang about his sudden departure, and hands him Gerart's metal gloves. Wolfgang happily accepts it, and points out that he was told that the gloves were destroyed in the duel, but Shin informs him that he repaired the broken gloves, and Gerart had asked him to give him the gloves. Wolfgang wears the gloves and swoons at their power, and Shin tells Wolfgang that it is up to him to choose who will inherit the gloves. The two men honor each other, and Wolfgang thanks Shin for his gift. Wolfgang and his daughter bid Shin and the girls goodbye. Nitwit Shin mindlessly asks the girls where they should go the next morning. Schnee suggests they go back to the Moon Sanctum's former location. Shin pulls out a teleportation diamond and teleports his little group home. At home, Shin detects 3 enemies watching them, and Schnee points out that they may be waiting for the Moon Sanctum to reappear. Schnee suddenly asks Shin if he will disappear again, and gets flustered when Shin calls her name. The girls begin their journey to the castle, and Shin reminds them that he is the summoned one. Tiara asks him why he is behind, and idiotic Shin foolishly points out that he cannot imagine waiting for someone who might never return. Tiara points out Shin could never, because elves live long lives and have different perceptions of time. She adds that elves mostly look for reasons to live, and Shin begins whining when Tiara teases him. At the guild, Shin asks to see Barlux. When Celica accuses Shin of traveling with only women, Shin announces he is friends with Wilhelm. The guild goes quiet at the mention of Wilhelm, and Shin asks why. Celica explains that Wilhelm never joins parties and people find it difficult to approach him. Shin smiles like a fool, and mentions that Wilhelm is often misinterpreted. Celica points out that Wilhelm is an exceptional man. Celicia walks in to inform Shin Barlux is ready to receive him. In the inner rooms, Barlux apologizes for keeping Shin waiting before introducing him to an old man, Arhad Royal. Barlux tells Shin that Arhad is the appraisal of the guild that appraised the skull-faced gem he brought. Shin wearily introduces himself, and Barlux reminds Shin that the castle has asked for his presence. Shin asks Barlux what the castle calls him for, and Arhad chips in to ask Shin if he knows that a sword flew into the palace. When Moron Shin tries to deny it, Arhad describes the sword and informs Shin that the sword landed in the second Princess Rion's bedroom. Arhad adds that although no one was hurt, the sword's elemental enchantment and base materials are impressive and comparable to the kingdom's royal sword. Arhad continues that the gem from the skull-faced Shin defeated also possessed powerful mana and is on another higher level. Shin smiles like an idiotic spider caught in its web and asks the men how they figured out he was involved in the issue. Arhad explains that after appraising the skull-faced gem, He was assigned to appraise the sword, and he discovered traces of mana left on the gem on the sword. Arhad mentions that from there, it was easy to trace back to who brought the gem. Barlux apologizes for revealing Shin's identity after promising him anonymity, but Shin assured him there was no other way he could go about it. Barlux smiles and informs Shin that the second princess Rion is the one who summoned him. Shin freaks out about the princess summoning him for punishment, but Barlux assures him that the princess has slain Skullface before, and based on her experience, she has convinced everyone that it is no easy task. Shin asks Barlux what the princess wants him for, and the two men admit they have no idea. At night, Shin narrates his predicament to the girls. Shni jokingly tells Shin that he will most likely be forced to join the army or marry a noble. After learning to find his way out of being forcefully recruited, Shin asks how to slip away from a royal marriage proposal without causing problems. Shni suggests he lies that he is betrothed to her or Tiara. Tiara tries to protest, but Shni asks her if she wouldn't like it to be true. Tiara blushes and claims not to mind it only if they are pretending. Tuzuha transforms into a human and declares she wants to be Shin's fiancée. Shin informs Tuzuha that their engagement will ruin him socially, and he is not getting engaged for real. Shin dresses like a red respectable clown and reports to the castle the following day. Rion's chief of guards shows Shin to the princess's office. Rion welcomes Shin and introduces herself formally. After Shin returns the introduction, Rion urges him to speak to her informally. Shin agrees and goes straight to the point. Shin asks the princess why she called him, and the princess shows him a box containing the Skullface's sword that landed in her room. The princess asks Shin if he recognizes the sword. Shin admits it is the sword the Skullface was wielding. The princess asks Shin if he knows how powerful the sword is, and Shin tells her that he is, and the sword destroyed his weapon in the battle. Rion smiles and points out Shin is different from most powerful adventurers who would have claimed to be a chosen one. Rion tells Shin that any adventurer observed to be powerful gets summoned to the castle. She adds that even if many have used the opportunity to plot assassinations, Shin seems like a good man. Shin mentions he has never done anything to seem innocent, and Rion tells him he doesn't need to, because she possesses the skill of intuition, and her hunch is never wrong. After Rion adds that Shni would never give an introduction letter to a criminal, Shin nervously asks Rion what she wants from him. Rion rises to her feet and announces she wants him to fight her. In the castle hallway, an official is attacked by dark magic. Rion's chief guard facepalms himself and asks the princess if she is not meant to start by asking Shik to join their army. Rion foolishly points out that it's best to confirm Shin's abilities before any further actions. The chief guard mentions it is not princess-like to request a duel, but Rion insists that her sister is ladylike, not her. With that, Rion picks up the boxed sword and asks Shin to follow her. Shin takes pity on the stressed guard and pats him. Using the castle's teleportation orb, the princess leads Shin and her chief guard to an arena built for the training ground of chosen ones. Shin asks Rion how sure she is of the location's purpose. Rion admits that they only assume the purpose of the arena, and are yet to understand the concepts of teleportation. The princess pulls out her sword and asks Shin to have a go at her. Shin asks the princess to go easy on him, and the chief guard announces the beginning of the duel. Rionni and Shin charge towards each other and clash their blades. The princess suddenly throws her sword at Shin and catches him off guard, and Rionni says she wants to surprise him a little. Shin assures Rion he is surprised, and Rion promises her next move won't be easy. Shin adjusts his stats to fit the battle type and charges towards Rion. Rion blocks Shin's attack and urges him to go all out with his skills. Shin unleashes a fight mode and is surprised to see the princess unleash the same mode. Shin charges at Rion, and Rion not only blocks his attack, but she also attacks him within split seconds. Shin points out the princess is fast and strong, and Rion reminds him he dodged her attack regardless. Rion mentions that they share the same fighting methods, and Shin quickly suggests they suspend their fight before informing her that her sword is ruined. The chief guard commends the attacks and defenses used in the duel, and Rion agrees to conclude the duel. Meanwhile, in the castle, two guards restrict the enchanted official. In the arena, Shin politely rejects the princess's offer to join the military force and asks her why she brought the Skullface sword when she didn't use it in their duel. Rion explains that in their kingdom, a man gives a woman a sword during betrothment as a weapon to strike him down if he were unfaithful. Rion adds that the custom is outdated, and she would like to consider the sword as a gift from him to her. Shin asks if her suggestion implies he proposed to her, and the princess points out it does. Shin chuckles nervously and explains that the sword landed in her room by mistake. The princess laughs the situation off, and the chief guard informs Shin that some people are plotting against him to leverage the sword incident to arrest him as a criminal. Shin points out that even if the incident is not intentional, the sword could have easily killed someone. The princess suggests they treat the sword gift as a tribute. Rion begs Shin to give her the sword, and Shin happily does, in exchange for access to the restricted zones of the magical library. Rion agrees to Shin's terms before admitting she has used the sword. The three teleport back to the castle to see the guards on the floor, and Cardinal Greril, the enchanted official, subconsciously standing behind a teleportation orb. Rion asks the official what his problem is, and Shin immediately informs them that the official has been afflicted with charm and confusion. The chief guard quickly shakes the official, but the teleportation orbs begin releasing a weird dark energy. Shin suddenly feels sick and mysteriously teleports out of the room with Rion. The two get teleported to a dilapidated environment which Rion identifies as Kalkia. After ensuring they are the only victims, Rion wonders how someone as powerful as the Cardinal could get corrupted. Shin asks Rion if she can use telepathy, but Rion informs him she cannot. Shin tells Rion he will communicate with his party members before asking for the nearest town. Almost immediately, Shni reaches out to Shin and bombards him with questions of worry. Shin assures Shni he is okay and explains his predicament. When Shni informs Shin that mind control spells are taboos, Shin concludes that someone is operating in the shadows. Shin points out that he can't use teleportation magic in front of the princess, and asks Shni to take care of things at her end. The two agree to link up after Shni assures the castle about the princess's safety. Shni assures Tira that Shin is fine before telling her to join her in an urgent business in the castle. On their way to the castle, Shni informs Tira that Shin is caught in trouble with a demon. Shni briefly explains what a demon is and tells Tira not to fret because they are going to the castle for observation. Behind the castle, Shni casts a concealment spell and sneaks into the castle with Tira. While walking through the castle, Tira asks Shni where they are going. Shni mentions that they are going to the dungeon to check on the captured demon. Shni enchants the guards to sleep and steals the prison key. In the prison, Shni reveals her presence and asks the Cardinal what had happened. The Cardinal sadly informs her that he remembers nothing of the enchantment being cast on him, and no matter how hard he tries to recall, all he can conjure are fragments of memories. Shni assures the worryful old man that the victims involved were teleported safely and will be returning soon. The old man thanks Shni for her help, and Shni asks permission to cleanse the Cardinal. After cleansing, the demon reveals itself, and Shni summons her magic sword. Shni scans the 14-eyed monstrous demon, and notices it has a name. The demon recognizes Shni, and Shni mentions it has been 500 years since she has come across demons. The demon accuses Shni of always obstructing their plans before releasing a battalion of bullet-like attacks. Shni blocks all the attacks sent her way, and the demon asks her why she is protecting humans. Shni declares that it would be wrong for the old man to get prosecuted over what he did not do, and allowing a demon to roam freely would disgrace the moon sanctum. The demon narrates that the high humans who defeated his kind forsook their world and left. The demon adds that the people are divided and full of corruption. The demon concludes that the human race is ending. It invites Shni to join his cause. Shni refuses his invitation, and the demon mocks Shni for being abandoned by her master. Shni asks the demon what it says. The demon repeats itself, and reminds Shni that her high human master will never return to her. When the demon tries to push Shni into joining him by saying hurtful things about her master, Shni summons a special blue moon sword and beheads the demon in an instant. While the demon's head rolls to the floor, the demon asks if the high humans have returned. Shni frees the Cardinal and walks out of the prison triumphant, while the guards swoon over Shni's beauty. Shni walks in on the king, and First Princess's sighing contest with the Cardinal behind her. Shni explains the demon incident, and assures the royalties that the princess and Shin were transported safely. The Cardinal apologizes for the trouble he caused, and the king reminds him he was under the influence. The king asks the Cardinal if he would accept his former post in the church. The Cardinal happily accepts. Shni asks the king to contain the matter before excusing herself. Tira nervously runs after Shni, and asks her master what they are to do next. Shni informs Tira that they will travel to a city to link up with Shin and the princess. When Tira asks Shni how they will travel since Shin is with the wagon, Shni responds that they will run there. With Shni traveling by foot and Tira riding in Shimmer's back, the two ladies begin their journey to meet their master. Shin asks Rion what she knows about the Pure Lands, and Rion explains that the Pure Lands are cities that fell during the Disc of Prosperity event, and are rumored to take several chosen ones to take down the monsters that appear within it. Shin points out that they will need a form of weapon, and Rion mentions that she is thankful that she was teleported with the boxed skull-face sword. Rion asks foolish Shin what he plans to use as a defense weapon. An idiot prideful Shin smiles with his eyes closed like a wet puppy trying to scratch an itch while inwardly pointing out that he cannot let the princess know the extent of his true powers just yet. Shin adds that it might be a struggle even for him while they find their way out of the Pure Land. The two lost fools wander around the Pure Land. Rion narrates the story about the existence of a little door that is rumored to serve as the exit and entrance of a new gate. Shin suggests they search for the door, instead of walking around cleansing the Pure Land of its monsters. Idiotic Shin spots a wall and asks Rion if she is fine with climbing a wall. Dumbbutt Shin leaps into the air and suddenly descends slowly back to the base of the wall. Nimrod Shin makes another attempt to leap over the wall, but the same result follows. Shin asks Rion what she observes from his jump, and Rion tells him that after Shin had jumped into the air, he vanished. When he got above the wall, he reappeared on the ground. Shin suspects his reappearance has something to do with teleporting before trying to jump over a lower part of the fence. Shin mentions that he knows what is responsible for the disturbance. Shin leads Rion forward within the Pure Land where they come across a magic ball of light. Stupid Shin smirks in realization and explains to Rion that the presence of the magic light ball means the entire city is a dungeon. Surprised by her knucklehead partner's words, Rion exclaims that she has never heard of a city becoming a dungeon. Shin explains that the city-turned-dungeon works differently from the standard dungeon she is familiar with, and they can only reach the exit of the dungeon by following a set of routes. Rion brilliantly points out that the reason Shin is not able to fly over the fence or take a detour is because the route sends straying participants to where they were before the detour. Shin, with a stupid smirk on his face, adds that they have to follow the magic light balls, overcome lurking traps, and defeat monsters to escape the dungeon. Rion smiles at her not-so-useless partner and expresses her gratitude for Shin being his teleported partner. Shin exchanges the declaration of gratitude, and the princess blushes like an idiot. Before taking charge of the situation, Rion instructs Shin to inform her of any strange sightings he finds. Shin announces that the magic light ball will teleport them into a new location before volunteering to first, and return immediately after confirming the safety of the new location. Shin touches the magic light ball, teleports out of the scene, and returns swiftly as promised. He informs the princess, Rion, that the new vicinity is safe and not too far from their current location. The princess apologizes for pushing Shin into the role of a lab rat, and Shin assures her that he chose to go because he knows he will be capable of escaping whatever is on the other side without a hassle. Shin smiles his usual worthless smile, and inwardly mentions that he can instantly slaughter any monster in the game world if he is not being watched. Rion promises to repay Shin for his kindness, and the two lost fools teleport through the magic light ball. Shin scans that area and announces that there is a monster lurking around the area. When facing the monster, Rion asks Shin what the ugly and nasty monster is. Shin explains that the monster is a ghost-type monster known as a gilly-ways, which uses earth and wind magic. Shin warns the princess that the monster's movement is irregular and unpredictable. The gilly jumps into the air and casts a dust tornado magic on its attackers, and Rion comments on how great the monsters of the Pure Land are. Shin assures the princess he will take care of the monster's spell, and all she has to do is try to land a pinch against the gilly monster. With a powerful zigzag slash, Shin knocks down the monster. Rion jumps down screaming before slashing the monster in two. Shin smirks and delivers the ending blow against the monster. Rion smiles and asks Shin how they had defeated the monster in 3 moves. Shin informs her that the skill-face sword she is wielding contains light magic. Shin also adds that the light is a weak point of some monsters. Rion happily asks Shin what type of sword he is using, and Shin tells her that his sword is called Kakura. After Rion teases Shin over having a secret and powerful sword, the two buffoons walk toward them. Rion asks Shin how many monsters he can sense with his magic way, aka his invisible game-setting device, and Shin informs her that he can identify 20 monsters before adding that monsters typically don't leave their territory within the dungeon, but they should still be cautious regardless. After passing through another magic light ball, Shin and Rion face a high-level slime monster. The princess underestimates the severe warnings Shin tries to tell her. She swoops into the sky and pushes out her new sword. The slime surprises Rion by sliding itself from her attack and pinning her down with parts of its slime. The slime begins melting the princess's clothes, and Shin dashes in and destroys the monster. With a stupid look, Shin foolishly talks about getting in contact with the slime and taking it down together. Rion smirks and informs Shin that he started talking to her casually compared to when they had met. Shin turns around and avoids the princess's gaze. The princess asks Shin why he is trying so hard to avoid her. Shin embarrassingly points out that a better portion of her clothes has been melted by the slime juices. Shin offers her his jacket and shakes the cold. Rion mentions that Shin has a bunch of clothing items, and Shin nervously tells her that he was gifted almost all of them with the tools. While patrolling the game, Shin asks if Rion can use magic, and Rion points out that they barely use magic to fight. Shin informs Shni about his plan to teach the princess how to use the spell. After the lessons, the two buffoons walk around the dungeon and come across an egg-like shaped monster. Shin points out that the dungeon has started as if it is trying to purge them. The monster egg hatches and immediately transforms into a huge and nasty griffin monster, spitting out a powerful burst of freezing energy. Shin immediately picks Ronnie up and flies out of the scene just in time before the strange blast overcomes them. In a secluded area, Rion asks Shin to set her down before asking what they can do. Shin instructs Rion to strike from behind while he works as a decoy. Rion smiles and asks her stupid partner if he will be able to handle his role. Shin assures the princess that although he doubts that the monster will hit him if it does, he can simply take it in. With that, Shin begins running and distracting the monster. He pulls out a bunch of finger blades and throws them against the monster. While the monster growls into the sky, Rion sees an opening and jumps into the hair to strike it down repeatedly. The monster hits Rion with its wing, and Rion wonders how strong the wing is. Shin calls Rion's attention into the air, and Rion watches him. Rion asks Shin if the deed is done, and Shin happily tells her that the griffin monster is gone. Suddenly, the monster regenerated in surprise. Shin insists that he is sure they have defeated the monster, and Rion mentions that the monster has regenerated 100%. The monster screams into the afternoon air and blesses the two fools with ice-cold breath, and Rion and Shin run for dear lives. While they run, Rion asks Shin what they can do to destroy the monster. After racking his brain a bit, Shin points out what he does before asking Rion to help him with a favor. Rion exclaims when Shin asks her to find the device to open the gate herself, but Shin pays her no attention and instructs her he will slow down the monster while Rion examines the opening mechanism. When Rion asks what business she has with the opening mechanism, Shin points out that the fast regeneration of the monster is likely from magic, and there is a spell somewhere regenerating the monster. Rion adds that the spell must have been added to the opening mechanism. Rion points out that opening the gate could lead to temporary immobilization of the griffin and escape. With a stupid smile, Shin mentions that it is common for monsters to want to form shows and laugh. With that, Shin goes high into the sky. Shin confesses that it doesn't matter if there is a spell or not. With Rion out of the way, Shin releases his maximum power and destroys the monster in a single slash. The monster's head regenerates, and Shin happily declares his plans to use the monster as a lab rat to see how much power he can release at a go. After defeating the regenerated monster for the 30th time, Shin decides to use a different approach. A white sphere appears in the chest of the monster and suddenly begins drawing Shin into it. Shin throws a fire attack, but the sphere in the monster absorbs it, and Shin becomes engulfed in golden envelope light and breaks free from the compelling force of the creature. Shin attacks the dumb giant and realizes it has lost its regenerating abilities. Shin slashes the monster's neck and watches it explode into nothing. Rion walks into the scene and asks Shin what the explosion is and the whereabouts of the griffin monster. Shin informs her that he obliterated the monster in her absence. Outside the dungeon, Shin informs Rion that they are to link up with a friend of his in the next town. Shni receives word from Shin informing her he will be spending the night camping with the princess. Shni immediately instructs Tiara and the mythical animals to begin their journey. At night, beside a camp, Shin offers to take the first watch and offers Rion some tea. Rion asks Shij how he is so prepared, almost as if he planned their night outside. Shin explains that he was formerly traveling with an item box. Rion looks at Shin in admiration and closes the distance between them. Rion points out that it feels refreshing to finally meet someone who speaks bluntly enough to have a fun conversation with. Shin asks Rion if she has a fun relationship with her family, but Rion admits she doesn't. Shin mentions that he is free to have a nice chat with Rion whenever before. The following morning, a battalion of Skullfaces marches towards the next town where they are supposed to link up with Shni and the others. Rion wonders why a massive horde of monsters is heading towards the next town, Valmer. She mentions that the actions of the monsters are a flood. In confusion, Shin asks Rion what a flood is. Rion explains to the immature idiot that a flood is when the magic matter overflowing from a pure land coalesces enough, transforms, and releases a ton of monsters. Rion adds that the Mist Garuda protects the area around the Pure Land, and Valmer is the only path to avoid the mist. Rion continues that it is for the same reason that Valmer is fortified and serves as the bulwark against magic floods. Rion impacts knowledge in dull and useless Shin's brain that there are strong shoulders and chosen ones in Valmer, but the city always suffers significant casualties. Rion looks up in disgust and continues that up against a major flood, Valmer might not stand a chance. Shin foolishly tells himself that he must ask Shni to hurry to Valmer. Shin dumbly points out like a fool that it will take a while before the monsters reach Valmer before instructing Rion that they must join the Valmer army. At Valmer, Rion asks Shin how long it will take the horde of monsters to reach the town. Shin responds that it should take the monsters only a few days to get to Valmer. Rion excuses herself to meet up with the local lord. At the guild, Nimrod Shin links up with the guild master and reports his findings on the flood traveling toward the town. The guild master points out that Shin is speaking like he has seen the flood physically, and Shin tells him that he saw a massive amount of nasty monsters heading toward Valmer near the Pure Land. The guild master mentions that if Shin's claims are true, then they will begin preparing. Shin pulls out his Moon Sanctum introduction card and shows them to prove that he means business. Shin asks the guild master to consult the local lord if he still does not believe him, and that his companion is currently meeting with the lord of the town. The guild master assures him that he trusts his words before announcing his plans to declare a state of emergency. The guild master adds that if Shin's companion has an audience with the lord of the land, the army will act hastily. The guild master continues that as soon as they get word from above, they will start evacuating the citizens. The guildmaster turns to his assistant and orders her to get in touch with the representatives of every guild. After the assistant excuses herself from the room, the guildmaster asks Shin what he wishes to do. Stupid Shin volunteers to stay and help the town fight the monsters, like the benevolent idiot he is. The guildmaster thanks him before adding that they are currently short on arms. Shin fantasizes over a signboard in town. Schnee contacts him to inform Shin that she is almost at Valmer. Shin instructs Schnee to inform the guildmaster that she would like to join their fight against the flood. Shin asks Schnee about the familiar poster he was fantasizing about, but Schnee tells him she has no idea what he is talking about. Shin walks into a short blonde elf he recognizes as Barrett. Barrett recognizes Shin, and the little elf man gushes over meeting Shin. Shin admits he never expected to run into a friend's supporting character from the game. Over tea in a cafe, Barrett asks Shin if he plans to join the army of Valmer and fight against the flood. Slow and self-righteous Shin confirms he is before adding that he has just finished talking to the guildmaster. Barrett asks Shin why he did not wipe the flood immediately after he found it, and Shin explains that he was with the second princess of Byrelict at the time, and he cannot use his full strength with her watching. Barrett smiles at Shin's response, and mentions that he can see a princess proposing marriage to him. Shin laughs his usual hypocritical laughter, and boasts that the second princess is indeed interested in him, hence his reasons for trying to eradicate the flood without using his full strength. Barrett offers to help Shin whenever he needs him, and Shin suddenly recalls something. He asks Barrett about the signboard he was gawking at in the town square. Barrett mentions that the signboard belongs to a shop owned by Shin's old friend Hibinako. Shin asks if Hibinako still exists in the game world in surprise. Barrett mentions a few of Shin's friends that are in Valmer. Barrett continues that Shin's friends are currently out of the city on business but are doing fine. Shin admits that he thought his friends died in the death game. Barrett asks Shin not to be surprised before mentioning that he has a list of players in the game world. After Barrett presents the list to Shin, Shin points out that every player on the list was involved with him one way or the other. Barrett hands another list to Shin and explains that it is a running list of known individuals identified as player killers. Shin looks at the list and reminds himself that the player killers took out lots of his friends and other people during the death game. Barrett explains that when players were first discovered in their world, Schnee was the one who insisted that they look for player killers right away. Shin admits that Schnee never mentioned anything like other players. Barrett points out that Schnee not mentioning the existence of players and player killers is an act of betrayal. Shin chuckles like the hypocritical little piece of shit he is, and Barrett adds that supporting characters must not deliberately withhold important information from their masters. He points out that Schnee must be his follower, but she deserves to be punished for keeping crucial information from him. Shin insists that Schnee will never betray him before having a flashback to when Schnee lied about not having an idea of the signboard. Barrett goes against his words and says that knowing Schnee's personality, she would never try to hurt Shin by hiding information. Too late, man. The distrust has already been planted. Shin agrees and speaks out loud that Schnee would never betray him. Barrett announces that he must begin preparing for the flood. When Shin asks Barrett if he intends to fight with the army, Barrett denies it and points out that Valmer is safe with Shin around. While walking in town, Shin informs Schnee that after doing some research on floods, he discovered that a powerful individual has appeared amid low-level hordes a few times. Shin points out that the larger the flood, the more likely they are to show. Yuzuha hugs Shin from nowhere, and Shin asks Tiara where Schnee is. The following day, Tiara asks her master where she is off to, and she informs her that she must excuse herself to meet with the Chosen Ones at the Lord of the Land's castle. Shin points out that Schnee returned in the middle of the night, so he never got to ask her about the player killers and the other existing players. Shin has a flashback to when Barrett called Schnee a betrayer. The Lord of Valmer welcomes Shin and introduces them to his board of officials. The Lord of Valmer instructs the team on their battle tactics, and Tiara feels sorry for the knights under Schnee. After waiting for the monsters, none of the monsters show up, and the people regroup to discuss the new development. Schnee points out that she has come across a situation where the flood disappears like they just did. Schnee adds that after the disappearance, the monsters gush out of nowhere and attack the town. Shin points out that the incident Schnee is mentioning is an event in the game. Schnee opens her eyes and adds that there is a possibility there will be a powerful individual leading such a major flood, aka the event boss. On their way to the Moon Sanctum, Shin asks Schnee if she used large-scale spells in guild battles during his absence. Schnee denies it and mentions that she can handle most things with standard area of effect spells. In the Moon Sanctum, Shin forges a big-ass bow for Tiara. While the troops and everyone await the flood, Schnee tells Shin there is something she would like to discuss with him after the battle. The monsters approach Valmer and Schnee conjures a blue large-range magic and lands it on the monsters. Tiara and Yuzuha praise Schnee, and Rion orders the soldiers to attack. Shin points out that the flood is not an ordinary flood of monsters, and asks Schnee to repeat her blue light spell, but Schnee uses the Servant Master network to tell Shin that she cannot create large-range attacks repeatedly. Shin jumps into the sky and wields his fire sword. The surrounding monsters burn after coming in contact with Shin's flames. Before Rion can lead the army to attack the monsters, Tiara shoots an arrow that lands in the must of the monsters with a big blast. Rion smirks at Tiara's cute jubilation and attacks a line of monsters. A big monster attacks Rion. When Tiara tries to help her, she staggers and points out that she used a lot of mana for her attack. Just in time, Wilhelm swoops into the scene and saves Rion. Tiara recognizes Wilhelm, and Lacia greets Tiara from behind and offers to replenish her mana. Rion and Wilhelm join forces and take down the huge monster. Rion thanks Wilhelm for saving her before asking why he is in Valmer, and Wilhelm explains that the guild received a request for assistance. Wilhelm has a flashback to Marie begging him to save Shin from the monster and smirks. Shin protects himself with full body armor and punches a monster to the ground like paper. The guards around Shin ask the armored man who he is. Shin asks the guards to call him Red before suggesting they leave so that he can use his powers without restraint. The guards return in fear, and Shin activates his cursed axe. Shin slices through a great number of monsters and spots the event boss. The demon sends a mind-numbing spell to the soldiers, and Shin lifts his attribute's limit. He jumps into the air and defeats the demon in one powerful smash of his cursed axe. Obtuse Schnee foolishly informs her nitwit master that the monsters have been cleared completely, and the town inquires about 0 casualties. Wilhelm and Lacia leave after the battle, but Shin and his girls are forced to stay for the celebration of their victory. At the party, Rion calls on Shin, and Schnee asks her master if anything happened between him and Rion. Shin denies it instantly and acts nervous around Ryoni. Schnee walks out of the scene out of jealousy. Shin links up with Schnee. Schnee apologizes for walking out on her idiot master. Shin asks Schnee if she feels jealous, and Schnee admits she is. Schnee asks Shin if Barrett told him about the players and the player killers, and Shin confirms. Schnee immediately apologizes for not telling him, because she fears he would go back to becoming the old Shin if he found out about the existence of other players. Schnee bursts into tears and claims to not know how to go back to her old self. She admits that she wishes to be Shin's rock, and Shin pulls the crying elf in for a surprise hug. Shin apologizes and admits that he would have done the same if he was in her shoes. He confesses that after defeating the game boss and returning to the game world, he felt so lonely until the day they reunited, and he realized Schnee remembered him. Shin assures Schnee that he has decided not to punish her before asking her to promise to never keep secrets from him again. Schnee suddenly asks Shin if he is still in love with Mariano, and Shin tells her he is. Schnee ignores her master's response. She looks into his eyes and tells him she will not give up her love for him, and she will continue loving him even after he finds his way back into his world. Schnee walks back to the party, and the little group enjoys the rest of their evening. The following morning, Shin and the girls leave Valmer for the next town. After an old friend tells Shin about the existence of other players and player killers, Shin considers Schnee to be a nasty betrayer. Schnee and Shin link up in Valmer to fight the Flood, and the two work hand in hand to eradicate the horde of monsters with the help of Tira, Wilhelm, Rion, and the others. During the victory party, Schnee reveals the secret she has been keeping from her master and begs for his forgiveness before confessing her feelings. Comment below if you support the ship between Shin and Schnee. Hey guys, that wraps it up with the new Gate Season 1. Let us know in the comment section what Japanese anime you would like us to recap next. See you later. XOXO.